Hello, this is Ian from Device 42, and thank you for joining me today as we go through an overview of our API. Now, you can learn about our API at any point by visiting our documentation at api.device42.com, and you'll see that this is not locked behind an access key or an access token, and in fact, you don't even need your own Device 42 instance up and running to learn more about it and interact with it using a live demo server. So we have a live demo server set up at this URL here, and you can log in at any time using the credentials guest for the username, device42 underscore rocks bang for the password. And then that way you can use our documentation to make live API calls and see how those reflect in a live Device 42 instance in real time. So there's some information here in regards to how the API works, responses, limits, things like that. The menu on the left-hand side will have all of the endpoints available with the Device 42 API, and clicking on any of these will give you a submenu with the post, put, get, and delete calls that are available. So let's try creating a new device using our API by create a device by name. So we'll click this API call here and get some additional information, including notes, what a successful response status looks like. Scrolling down, we can see all the available parameters for this API call. So let's go ahead and call our device API create a device so that it'll stand out to us. We can give it a serial number, a hardware model and manufacturer, give it the type of physical, and an operating system. There are lots of different parameters you can set here for creating a device. Is it a switch, resource information in terms of memory and CPU, lots of other objects. We can also see a list of unsuccessful response messages. So if your API call doesn't work for whatever reason, this will show you what could have gone wrong. But let's try this out. And so we can see we had a successful API call. Here's the URL endpoint that we used to create the device. Here's an example of a curl command, and it shows us here that our device was created. And so if we copy our device name, scroll back up to the top, and open the URL to our demo site, we can do a quick search for that. And so I can already see that our device was successfully created with the hardware information, the serial number, and the Windows 10 operating system. So if you're not familiar with APIs, maybe you're not comfortable making calls yet, our documentation is a great way to learn how to make API calls, see what the formatting's like, and even have a live demo server to play against. You can also use something like Postman, an API tool, to help you make calls. And so what we can do now is try getting a list of all the existing devices in our demo environment here. So there's two options: all devices with brief details or detailed information. We're going to use our brief details here, and what I can do is copy the endpoint that we're going to use and then put this over in Postman. So like I mentioned, the Device 42 API supports get, post, put, and delete calls. We're using a get call against our demo server here. So we'll just type that in. API slash 1.0 slash devices. And so just be sure to include the credentials that are needed. We're going to use the basic auth option. I've already got the credentials set in here, so let's go ahead and get a list of our devices in the environment. Alright, so now we've got a list of all the devices in our environment with just some brief information. So details like the UUID, serial number, the URL that you can find that device record at, as well as the ID number. You can also include additional parameters, kind of like we did through the documentation. So maybe rather than get a list of all the devices, we just want to limit that information to 10. Postman will automatically put those additional parameters up in the URL here. We can hit send, and now we've only got a list of devices compared to our rather large one before. Now lastly, you can also use scripts or even a terminal to create API calls. And so pulling up a command window, a terminal, we can make a curl command to our API and get additional details or information, create objects, whatever the case might be. So one of the great API calls that can be helpful in an automation use case, maybe you're deploying some new servers to your environment, is get the next available IP in a particular subnet. So if we go back to our documentation, scroll down to the IPAM section, and then choose the suggest next available IP. We can see what that would entail here. I can choose, you would need, the two things you would need are the subnet ID as well as the mask bits, and that will generate a curl command that you can use. Or if you're familiar with how curl works, you can simply put that in on your own as well. And so we've got an example of that here. I'm including the curl command. It's a get call, the credentials used, the URL for our demo site, as well as the API endpoint, suggest underscore IP. I'm looking for the next available IP in the 10.42.0, or excuse me, the 10.42.2.0 subnet. And so once we make that call, we should get the next available IP in that particular subnet. All right, and so we got the next available IP, which is 10.42.2.2 in that particular range. And now we can assign that to a device or server that we may want to deploy in the environment. I hope this has been a helpful, informative video in learning about our API. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support@device42.com at any time. Thank you.